C5 Insight is a Microsoft partner that plans, builds, and supports solutions in Dynamics 365, Teams, SharePoint, and the Power Platform. Contact us to modernize your business today.
Hello, welcome to Roadmap to Relaunching Your D365 or M365 project. Today we're going to be discussing annual planning framework for moving your project forward, getting it back on track, or starting a new project with the right foundation. I am excited to turn things on over to our presenter, Managing Director of C5 Insight, Tricia Desso-Cox. Tricia is the author of Revenue Engineering. She's also an avid traveler and has 12 states to go in her quest to visit all 50 states. So please take it away, Tricia.
So as Allison mentioned, we're going to be talking about roadmaps, whether you're just getting started or you're relaunching either your Dynamics or your M365 solutions. We've got a lot of content to cover for you today. And she did also mention in her intro that there is a Q&A function. So if you do have questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to drop those in that area. And one of the team members will respond to you right then if they can. If not, we'll circle back at the end to answer any of those questions that y'all might put in there. So let's dive in. If you could plan for a customer or employee engagement project the same way that you could plan for accounting, operations, or distribution projects, then you wouldn't be here today. The fact is, these projects are very different at every level. The way that you're trying to engage customers and employees is different. The way you design process is different. The way your people not only need to work, but even think about what they're doing is different. And the way that leaders need to lead is different. Here's the reality. You need leaders who are digitally strong. Few organizations actually have that today. And part of your plan needs to be to create strong digital leaders and managers in sales, in marketing, in customer care, even in executive leadership. So think your CFO, your CIO, your CEO, all of those leadership types of roles in the organization. And it's hard to start pulling the string of a technology roadmap without everything else we're here to talk about coming along. So understand that everything we're talking about in the next hour will figure into your overall plan. The initial vision should be in a roadmap, but more detailed planning for other components typically happens throughout the project lifecycle. As Allison mentioned, my name is Tricia Desso-Cox, and I'm the Managing Director at C5 Insight. We're a partner out of North Carolina that specializes in both Dynamics 365 and Microsoft 365 tools like SharePoint and Teams. The intersection of people and process is my sweet spot, and I love a good business problem to solve. And the background image on this slide, hence my love for travel, is Smuggler's Notch in Vermont. It's one of my absolute favorite places on earth. Speaking of destinations, let's summarize what happens in most companies when they start to look for a new technology solution for a business challenge. There are really two primary paths that, so let's use a metaphor to look at the examples. First path, think of a voyage at sea, looking to settle into a new place that promises to be better. How could this be approached? First of all, you start by looking for a great boat, the most seaworthy boat that you can find. And from there, you take one of two approaches. You either immediately shove off and say things like, we're pretty simple, or we want this to be as plain vanilla as we can get. And with a great boat, also known as your great software, you head out to sea. But soon you realize that you didn't really know where you were going. You didn't really know what the business wanted. We hear terms from you like, why did we get this solution in the first place? We feel lost at sea. Every direction looks the same. Or the second path, you create a very detailed plan and you follow it to the letter. You say things like, we're really complex and we want to have a clear project plan. And after taking time to do all of that, you set off on a very specific and often very long journey. But business is changing faster than ever, and the plan fails to include the ability to adjust to lessons learned along the way. So after a lot of investment, you end up in the wrong place, delivering on a goal that is no longer important. So what's the right way? Most people expect to hop into a new system and it'll take them from their old, well-worn path of doing business into a process superhighway, sort of like a GPS, but business technology solutions really aren't a GPS. So let's take a look at a more realistic set of expectations. You don't go from a country road to a superhighway without a lot of frustrating construction. And you need to ask yourself, is your team ready to deal with that? Or you might not ever even really get around to real transformation for the business because you spend all of your time in reaction mode. Thus, you just end up paving the potholes, and paving potholes never leads to that smooth superhighway. The trouble is always right there lingering under the surface. Or you build that awesome superhighway that everybody should want to use, but you don't get the word out and people stick to their comfortable back roads and never make the leap. So one reason for your roadmap is to set expectations and plan for the construction that you're going to deal with. And another reason why you want a roadmap is to really understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Reflect for a moment on whether you can go back to your initial D365 or M365 project launch and say what problem you were really trying to solve. And reflect on whether or not you could think about that in quantifiable terms. You're really looking at a 4-step process for building a roadmap. First, you want to get collaborative with your team. Give a broad section of your team members an opportunity to weigh in, to share their concerns, to share their vision about where they believe the technology should be going and how it can best support them. And then you want to do some business analysis, really diving in and understanding what they've shared with you along the way and what the impacts are to both people and process, forgetting about the technology for right now. Then you want to document those findings so that you have a very clear definition of what your current state is and what the desired future state is. And then you want to circle around at the end and validate that everything that you've heard from the team, it has been understood appropriately and it's been documented back to them, and you've got clear vision and agreement from the broader team on where you're going. Listen, understand, connect, and know. That spells luck, but not the kind that you're thinking of. So let's dive a bit deeper. Let's look at how we can use luck storming and some other tools to define our team and give them a voice in the project. We tend to work towards the outside of this circle, what we're doing and how we're doing it. And often we never ask why at all. For good adoption, the why is very important. So we need to work from the inside out. Do you have a mission statement that everyone understands and has bought into? If not, that's the place to begin. And here are some questions to get you started in defining personas. Are there different types of customers or others in your value chain, like partners or distributors, that will be impacted by the technology? What departments have people who will be using the technology? Within your business leadership functions, how will operational, financial, or other executives be involved? And what about your IT group? How will this impact them? CUBS is the easy acronym to help remember this. From there, you would need to brainstorm the list of names of project leaders and participants. You might brainstorm the names and then use matrices or voting to prioritize them. On the right is a diagram of the profile of these individuals. Some of the deadly sins we see at this point include no sponsor. It's really required in almost every sized organization. That sponsor really needs that project to succeed, but a lot of times they can't really get hands-on and get down in the weeds of getting it done. A bad owner, this is a tough role. They have a lot of influence and they're really vested in the business side outcome, and they need to be able to plan to commit quite a bit of time. And they also need to have a track record of pulling off successful projects previously. And then a steering committee that acts like participants. Oftentimes, folks that make up your steering committee are going to be managers, but they rarely have all of that subject matter expertise that is required to really understand what's happening on the front lines. And although power and influence aren't quite as critical for them, they usually have a lot, which makes it more important for the owner to have even more. And then your participants, who may be the best, but may not have the right interest, they could be the vanguard of adoption. So if you put people on the team who can't be convinced, then they'll ignore the project and create risks. Sometimes populating this team means hiring, even if temporarily to fulfill some roles. And there are other roles that have a lot more to do with implementation, more technical and administrative roles. But right now, we're talking about leadership, and the other roles are a different matter. Dovetailing into those additional roles, this may be too complex or too simple, but all of the hats must be worn. So let's keep a few things in mind. Regardless of organization size, all of these things need to happen. But smaller organizations may have individuals rather than teams in these roles. And even smaller organizations may have people who wear multiple hats and take on multiple roles. And then even in your larger organization, some people may be on multiple teams. For example, your administrator may be on the tech team and the project team, maybe even leadership or governance, depending on the size of your company. You can see that the project team has a lot of connections. The idea is to spare them from the direct connection to users, which is the largest team. If you work with partners, consider for a moment if they're part of the teams outside of the tech team. For those of you who are saying no, ask yourself why not. Moving into actually collecting data from your teams, now that you've got your personas kind of identified, you got your leadership team identified, this is just one of dozens of exercises that we like to lead our various teams through. Some of the answers that we've heard to this question along the way include things like a single contact management system, collaborating on contracts and presentations, partnering with customers and partners, maybe through a portal, institutionalizing new best practices or SOPs, coaching, particularly our newer employees, making sure we have knowledge transfer when there's turnover, reducing the amount of time required to solve a customer problem, and many, many more. And this is just one example of luck storming. And luck storming is something that we usually do in multiple sessions with small audiences in much longer meetings, usually 2 to 3 hour workshops. They can be held in person or virtually, and we usually use post-it notes and voting and process design and things like that to share ideas. Luck storming can be a useful tool to help get your teams involved. When we talked about the why, the vision jumps a bit to the what, the goals, right? But what's often missing at this point when we're doing these workshops is the how. So take your goals and start to ask, how will we do this for each one? When we ask about goals, we get high-level things like a way to track everything. If someone wins the lottery and doesn't come back, it's easy to pick up where they left off, or visibility into a 360-degree view of our customer. All of those things are great, but the devil is in the details, right? So you should capture as much of it as you can up front. Operative words here are as much as you can. A roadmap is not a set of detailed requirements, but it is enough information to plot out the journey and at least get a bogey for the level of effort to deliver each step of that bigger journey. Our luck storming sessions typically last 2 to 4 days for each line of business involved. And here's the basic cadence of them. So we usually will start with a leadership team. We talked a little bit about persona identification, asking about goals and getting those categorized and prioritized, outlining some specific examples of those goals and how we may be looking at measuring success of the project. So we finish up with that leadership team first and foremost, and then we move into team meetings, which are very iterative. So you're going to follow the same process for each team that you meet with. You might meet with sales, with marketing, with HR, with IT, with engineers, right? If you're doing some kind of intranet project, you might want to meet with lots of different folks to determine what they need to find for information within your intranet. But you're going to follow that same process for each team that you're meeting with. And really what we're looking to do here is hone in on process, right? What are they doing day in and day out? Who are the seats on those teams that are living and breathing in those processes? What are the goals that they need to be able to accomplish? And working through those processes, and what feels painful for them today, right? Like, where can we really get in and start to solve some of those challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis? And then we pivot back to our leadership team for initial review and validation and prioritization before you move into developing more detailed roadmap plan. But not all of our engagement can happen in meetings, right? Sometimes we need to gather information in other meaningful ways. And we won't talk through all of these today, but here are a few highlights. One of the ones we like to do most often after we've done those workshops is a ride along, which is, really just getting in the same room with somebody or doing a screen share with somebody and just studying how they're getting their job done today. Identifying frustrations, opportunities for performance improvement, watching how they click through screens, how long it takes them to work through a process can be super valuable in gathering information. Another on here is field trips. So take the team on a field trip to get some vision for how others are getting the most out of the tools that they're using. Could be a recorded video, could be a live field trip with another team in the organization that's using the technology really well, could be a guest speaker, could just even be generic vision casting demos that you can find on YouTube or from your partner to get an idea of what the technology could be doing for you. Voice of customer and employee surveys to capture input can be really helpful to get a gauge of how people are feeling about the process and or the technology, and then benchmarking those surveys over time from the user perspective. Almost no one on your team is going to say, I love our system right out of the gate, right? So knowing you're improving can be difficult, and repeating those surveys to track key benchmarks can help understand where you're moving the needle. And then most departments are using processes, some completely manual, others with some automation. Sometimes they're in homegrown apps like Excel or Access. You can identify them in some of the other exercises and then prioritize and drill down into those to determine which could potentially be automated. And then screen cleaners, another one that we really love to do is just walking through how your departments are or aren't currently using the technology can really help lead to some improvements. So for example, do you have a form within your CRM system that's got way too many required fields, or another just with too many fields altogether? Or you have information, on a page in your intranet that's visible to teams that don't need it, right? So paring down that UI and making it super simple for them to find the things that they want to work with day in and day out. And identify the components of the system that are and are not being used, rate them red, yellow, or green, and identify proof of concept projects you can develop with one group that will help others develop a better vision for how it can work for them. So lots of different ways to engage your users, to gather lots of information about how processes are working today and where there's potential room for improvement. When all of our information gathering is complete and we're circling back to the leadership team, we usually have something that looks a lot like this. The background image was from an in-person event. The smaller front image is from a virtual workshop using Mural. And we essentially take all of those results and have that final meeting with our leadership group to help them prioritize all of the ideas that came out of those workshops into some kind of timeline. We typically use things like MVP or minimum viable product, right? Like what's the minimum viable thing we can get rolled out in a first phase? And then how do we layer in enhancements from there? What are those high priority enhancements, medium, or nice to have? Finally, listening means remembering what you hear. So all of this information you've collected is what we consider to be raw material, right? It's not the end product of your roadmap, but you need a way to capture it. And we do this so often at C5 that we have a quick way of capturing the Luxstorming results. So within a few days after we're done spending time with our clients listening, we can compile all of the raw materials into a document, which can be referenced for planning purposes. You should also plan to take that step as well. Okay, great. You've given the team a voice, you've gathered some information. So what are some practical ways you can analyze it to form a plan? Let's dig into a few tools that we can use for that. First of all, we want to spend ample time on process design. You want to identify, oops, I don't know why that just that advanced, y'all. Apologies for that. You want to identify parts of your process that are looking like the left side of the equation, right? The outdated, unused, abandoned pieces of your current state that are just causing pain in the organization. And then you want to look for innovative ways to improve that, right? Process design is about incremental gains and automation. And then another tool that we like to use sometimes are journey maps, which is really a better tool for disruption, right? If you're looking to just find that new way of doing things and rethinking your entire approach. You want to take your as-is items and turn them into the to-be pictures of a refined process. Next, we need to dig into the areas from those processes that we need to better understand. There are three big ones. First of all, knowing the situation for individual personas and the overall organization. Envisioning your future using some tools like fit gap and future state analysis, and then calculating the value and prioritizing using generic ROIs and specific ROIs. Start your situation assessment, you want to start with the individual personas. Cubs is the high level that we talked about earlier, but we want to break this down into individual roles. And to produce user stories for them, we want to make sure we're personalizing. We translate what we've learned into user stories. There's a whole area of focus around this, but getting things into a simple overview, as you see on the slide, and a story about how the user will interact with the technology can be helpful. As an example, as a road warrior, I need a place to capture appointments so that I can proactively plan my week.
Struggling to leverage Microsoft Enterprise solutions? At C5 Insight, we understand the intersection between technology, business, and people. Contact us to learn more.
And here we get a sense of the number of different solutions that are in use by another organization to size the problem of inefficiencies created by many solutions. The example we have outlined in the image on the right is a typical situation, but certainly not the only one. In this particular example, field sales can't afford the time to keep up with multiple systems, so they were significantly expanding the burden on their inside sales team and introducing a lot of inefficiencies. Giving them more information in an enterprise platform by reducing the number of systems seen, like on the left-hand side there, will speed up their process as they'll have fewer delays waiting for information that they've asked somebody else for. Hopefully result in fewer lost sales for that team because now they can see how others, including service or other members of the organization, are interacting with a customer in real time, and improve wins because access to better data and the ability to quickly collaborate on proposals and things like that should make it easier for them to serve the customer, right? There are many other ways to analyze the current state of people, processes, and technology, but remember, this is just a roadmap, not your specific project requirements. So we've talked about some ways to understand the current state. Now we want to focus on how we turn our worn out, sometimes broken processes into something a bit more efficient and collaborative. There are very few people who are good at this. Truth be told, most of the user experiences issues we fix are due to this exact statement. It's really important to understand that you can deliver exactly what the business asked for, and they can hate it. And it could be because they don't really know what they want until they see it, or it could be that your technology solution may offer something better. About 6 months ago, we were brought in to do a roadmap for an organization with an outstanding IT team. We were brought in because the team had done exactly what the business had asked them to do with their platform, but it was exactly the wrong thing to do. The result is that they ended up with a complex process that they wanted in the system. So a lot of their time and money was spent setting it up, but for their process, the technology they had chosen by itself just wasn't a good match. And now the process was taking too long and it had become way too rigid. So the team was tracking information in a system as a management report, but got no real direct value out of the system itself. And then management didn't really know how to look at that report. So then they required the team to export it to Excel. And essentially, not only did it not live up to their expectations, the teams were using it for time-consuming tasks that just made no bottom line impact. So they would have been better off with nothing at all. So with technology implementations, it's really a delicate balance, engaging with a team to know their process, but also knowing what has worked for others with that platform and what, more importantly, has not, and how people need to be engaged not only at the beginning of the process, but later to change their work habits, and being a part of the conversation about what should be delivered so everyone is on the same page. Your goal ultimately is to consolidate functionality into fewer systems and apps wherever it makes sense. Remember that big map that we showed a few slides ago with way too many pieces of technology? But the challenge is knowing whether or not it makes sense, right? So especially with the whole new suite of Microsoft tools, there are so many options of how to implement enhancements. The exercise becomes even more important. And it can be emotional sometimes within an organization. So legacy homegrown systems that we talked about, right, that are living in Excel or in Access that people don't want to kill off against your technology evangelists who feel like everything should be in their preferred tool. So what we like to do is use a fit gap tool to do that analysis. What's fit gap? The fit is how well the technology will match the needs. The gap is the needs that can't be met by that particular piece of technology. So here's a quick illustration for you. We start with your ideal solution requirements. And then we bounce that up against the capabilities of the selected technology platform. And then we see the basic fit and the basic gap, right? The gap can sometimes be reasonably covered with customizations. And then there's the risk, right? The piece where we have some unmeetable requirements, or sometimes on the flip side of that, we have some unexpected opportunities or benefits that the technology platform is offering that you weren't even potentially thinking about when you first started down the path. So fit gap is a great way to just look at your requirements and then bounce those up against the solutions that are being offered by the technology platform in question. And then evaluating that to figure out, can you live with the gap, and does the unexpected opportunity bring enough value that you would want to move forward or not? This particular example that we built out was for a company that already had a system in place, but needed to explain part of the reason that it was failing to their leadership. And they started by talking about the interpersonal communication in one of their offices, and how they communicated with customers, and how they leveraged partners as part of the communication, and that they had learning curves for all the technology that they had to access to run the business. And how that was exacerbated by all of the other offices that they also had to coordinate with, and the new emerging channels that they had to communicate with, the other partners and influencers that were involved, and the new apps that they had to use to manage all of that. And how they had thrown yet another system into the complex fray, expecting it to make things better, but it was just another system that they had to use. It added new complexity without removing any existing complexity. Any of that feel familiar to any of you on the line today? I know we've seen lots of clients out there who are experiencing this pain. So if you are feeling that pain, you are not alone. And their future state vision really was that when it comes to process and technology, most of the systems that they had needed to be integrated with one another, or some even needed to be eliminated altogether. By the way, that particular visualization exercise can also be used as a business case for getting a technology solution in the first place. You can talk about all the disparate ways that things are being tracked throughout the organization, not even living in corporate tools, just in Excel files and walking folders around the office and all that kind of stuff. So great visualization to help leadership get their head around the complexities that exist in your business. After all the analysis and building all of that information that you want to share, you might want to use the insights you've discovered to build a business case. A generic business case is a great way to start. This example is a business case for a CRM solution. It gives you an initial number and some general ideas of how to calculate the ROI for your specific business. And Nucleus Research actually has a great way to do this. We've simplified it into a spreadsheet. And here's an example, and note the study percentages, the assumptions for your business, the ROI, and understanding what's not included in that. And you always want to run a specific business case as well. So that was a generic example, but getting more specific, you want to actually produce estimates for the specific returns in your case. A few tips for you to consider: your business case should match up to that situation assessment that you work through. So all of those business processes you work through and identifying the pain points and building out the conversation to share with leadership, make sure your business case is aligned to some of those things. If the numbers seem high, cut them by 50%, right? You want a conservative ROI. Try bouncing them up against that nucleus generic ROI study as a balance. If they're vastly different, analyze it until you understand why they're different, and be careful about some of the numbers like a 5 times ROI. If you do the math on that, then the bigger your budget, the bigger your return, and no CFO is going to buy that. And remember that there is a non-financial side too. It probably shouldn't be central to your case, but it can be important. And when this is your main case and it gets approved, then you usually see management regarding it as a tool that your users will want without any real vision for how it will also be a leadership tool. And that rarely pans out. But the soft benefits are still important and should still be communicated. Okay, now it's time to actually build the plan. So let's dive into what we should be including in that plan. First of all, the situation assessment, right? That's all the things that we just talked about. Like a doctor who says, where does it hurt? The situation assessment hits directly on this. If you don't read it and say either, ouch, we need this, or wow, without this, we're missing a big opportunity, then you need to start over. Persona analysis, think Cubs, right? Not only defining their needs, but also their commitments and what it's going to take to deliver on the project. The next thing there, your business case. So both quantitative and qualitative outcomes. Some will remain estimates at this point, but some of those should be provable based on those situation assessment items. Your current state, you can't understand where you're going if you don't understand where you're starting from, but you don't need to have a ton of detail here. The next piece is the future state, which should be one of the larger sections, right? Where do you envision going? And don't worry about the sequence or how you're going to get there in this section. It's really just focused on processes and systems of the future. It is the transformation defined, and it should include process definitions here and defining what your initial processes will be. That fit gap analysis, this is where you start to decide not only which solution is the best fit, but also which processes should be migrated and which should stay where they are. And then the roadmap section. This is the heart of it, right? These are the general descriptions of each phases of your plan. All the components described in the future state are put into the roadmap and organized based on phases, including a bit of a general approach to how you're going to handle training and support. And then your initial phase plan should actually be a separate document, but this is the part of your roadmap engagement that says, here are the details for how we're going to get started in the very first phase. A few initial requirements, a few tighter estimates around those things, and a forecasted project plan are appropriate at that point. Expect your roadmap documentation to be somewhere in the vicinity of like 60 to 120 pages, depending on how far out you're looking. Expect it to take about 4 to 10 weeks to complete it as an entire process, and expect to deliver about 1 to 2 phases per year with a 3-month gap in between to make sure that you've got room for adoption, ongoing training, a bit of course correction if need be before you dive into another major phase. And now we want to talk about what to leave out, right? It's a roadmap, so don't sweat the small stuff. And a lot of the roadmaps that we've seen are all small stuff. The way that you can tell is that no one on the business side, not the executives, the managers, or the users want to read it. It's mostly technical stuff that's either over their head or things that don't really matter to them. And the price, which is what the executives really care about in that type of roadmap, is usually pretty far off. You should leave out the detailed requirements, right? Those detailed functional specifications, those should come at the beginning of each phase and sprint. If you develop them now, you're going to be that ship that runs aground that we talked about in the very first slide. Your project plan, also something that will come at each phase and sprint. I know we talked on the last slide about including an outline of a plan for your very first phase, totally appropriate, but any project beyond that, you want to wait, because by the time you get to phase 2, your business customers and team expectations for the tool based on what they have learned will change so much that any requirements or project plan you need will now need to be rewritten. Apologies. Budgeting estimates, yes, for sure. But know that these are also likely to change, right? This particularly true in agile projects where the requirements are constantly adjusted based on feedback from the team. And then data models. IT loves a data model, right? But focus on a conceptual data model, not a physical data model. Physical gets you married to a structure that may not work once you get started with implementation. And then governance. Governance plans, it's super important to have a governance plan, but should generally be done in parallel with a first phase and fine-tuned thereafter. The team will never appreciate how proper governance works until they're actually working within the system. And support, a lot like governance, also important, but it comes later. And the last thing on here, adoption. For us, this is a bit of a bad word. Organizations that push for this quickly lose sight of what they're really doing. You want to push for change in the business and to get the team to be thinking about how the tool supports that change. Adoption means you force it on folks most of the time, which could really be bad for the business. So these are all the little things, or majoring in the minors. Focusing on them can run up costs while also hurting your chances for success. Yes, big steps lead to big mistakes. We know this. We've talked a little bit about making sure you take a one step at a time approach in building out your roadmap and getting users engaged early in the process, hearing from them. You don't want to try to do too much too fast. Multiple phases works better. Taking a break between phases is ideal. Make sure that we're course correcting along the way as best we can. And so when we deliver this plan, we want to start with the overview of the long-term vision, and then we want to dive into the first project, and then dive into the business components of the first project. So make sure you've got a really nicely laid out plan that leadership can get their head around what the outcomes are, with just enough detail to help the business understand what that transformation will potentially look like, so that you can garner the support that you need to move that plan forward. Okay, this last section is mostly what comes next: leadership, governance, change management. So we're only going to spend a few minutes here discussing bringing closure to your roadmap and providing a few tips. It's better to take small steps to achieve big gains. So start with your roadmap, which serves as your vision and long-term plan. Break that down into digestible projects. Practice luck in each sprint to deliver bite-sized bits of functionality to your teams. This agile approach allows you to course correct along the way as you learn, as we've mentioned previously. And ensure you've got the soft skills programs like training, governance, support, and change management running throughout. And forget about being done. The expectation is that you can check off a technology project as being done, maybe with a little bit of support afterwards, but this is not email or accounting. You can't check off customers or employees as being done, and the closer processes and technology are to people, the more they will continue to change. So how do you know you have a quality roadmap? It should do 4 things. It should be transformational, meaning you are really focusing on long-lasting transformational change within the organization. This is not just a one and done, we're changing this one process. We're really looking longer term here. It should be incremental, happening over time, not this big bang, rollout approach. Multiple phases, adequate change management, adequate time to course correct in between. It should be collaborative, meaning you've engaged all of the necessary teams and stakeholders in that roadmap engagement as best you can to get their feedback and to help them feel engaged in the process. And ultimately, it should be simplifying, right? You should be taking that image that we had on that one slide of all of those very disparate systems that are not interconnected and lots of information living in a lot of different silos, and slowly bringing that more and more together under one comprehensive enterprise solution. You should be shooting for 10s here on this guide. So, it's the TICS rating guide, transformational, incremental, collaborative, and simplifying. Okay, in closing, we started with leadership and we're ending with leadership. If leadership doesn't see your project as a leadership and management tool, then we are going to struggle. Producing a quality roadmap can help them understand the importance of the investment. Thanks so much for your time today. My name is Tricia Desso-Cox. I work with C5 Insight, and we help organizations use digital workplace tools to become powered by luck. If you like the session and want to dive deeper, drop me an email for more information about the tools we shared today.